Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. here on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, a packed show for you this evening, a lot to talk about. And I should say that some people are having trouble getting onto StreamYard tonight. In some parts of the world, the StreamYard facility seems to be down, although thankfully it's working for us here in our particular area of Glasgow. But if suddenly something happens and the screen goes blank, then you know it's not our fault. It's simply the technology that we're working with. Hopefully it will continue through for the next hour. But folks, please do tell us where you are watching from. Please do send us your greetings. We love to read them out. We love to hear your comments and also to answer your questions. Now, we're calling this show tonight Stop Illegal Immigration, Upcoming Rallies in Scotland, because we're going to be talking about two rallies which are upcoming in Scotland to stop not just illegal immigration, but mass immigration. And we'll be talking about them, giving you the full details of them. One is this Saturday coming, and one is the Saturday afterwards on the 7th. And we all know that's the big one in Glasgow. So, folks, keep watching and let's hear your thoughts and opinions on things. Now, a few people come in already. And Debbie was first in. Debbie says, good evening, everyone. Has everybody had enough of two-tier Starmer yet? Oh, gosh, I was talking to somebody earlier today and they said they're just fed up seeing the bloke's face on the telly. And that's, in some ways, that's a sad commentary because we're going to be seeing him for at least the next 5 years if his plans go to plan. But the best laid schemes, of course, often don't. And so who knows what will happen. But yes, we're getting tired already of him, I have to say, Debbie. Susie says, well, I warn folk against voting Labour, but I have a small circle of influence. That's it. It's the people with the megaphone are the ones that get heard. And especially if you've got a big newspaper or channel, then you get heard. Derek says, good evening, Alistair and fellow unionists. What a wet night. Definitely not summer weather. Regarding two-tier, Keir, I hope it won't stop voters doing tactical voting in 2026. Well, that's a good point. And we're not going to be encouraging people to do tactical voting in 2026 unless Starmer and Anas Sarwar come out very strongly against mass immigration, come out very strongly against illegal immigration, and come out very strongly against resettling the so-called asylum seekers throughout Scotland. We need a major party to come out against all of these things. And Starmer and Anas Sarwar need to know that we have a vote and we can withhold that vote or we can vote for somebody else. And they really do need to know that because they cannot be hoping just to breeze into Holyrood. Starmer is definitely wanting his man Sarwar in Holyrood, but we're going to have to tell Starmer that's going to come at a cost, at a democratic cost, unless you follow our agenda this time. Our votes are not to be taken for granted. TC, good evening to you, sir, and all unionists everywhere, and to Marie, hi, and Roseanne Allen. When is the next rally? They are not advertising. The next, well, let's talk about the rallies since you asked. The next one is in Dumfries, and it's this Saturday, the 31st, and it's at 12 noon, and it is at the Midsteeple, as it's called, which is the big steeple in the high street of Dumfries. You can't miss that. And that's a rally which has been organised locally, not by any political parties, but just by concerned individuals who are drawing attention to and explaining that they don't want the big number of asylum seekers which are held at one of the hotels just outside Dumfries. They're concerned about what that may mean for safety of people, especially younger people in Dumfries. And they're concerned generally about the sheer levels of mass immigration that are beginning to appear now in Scotland and in all places. Dumfries, for crying out loud. So there is a Stop Illegal Immigration rally, which is going to be held. Here is what I was sent. I am a concerned father. Hashtag not far right. This Saturday at 12 noon. Stop illegal immigration. As I say, that's in Dumfries. So if you're anywhere in the south of Scotland, do go along and show some support to this group. As I say, we're not affiliated with them. It's nothing to do with a force for good. It's simply a concerned group of local people who have put that together. And they're non-party political. They're simply concerned for, as it says there, they're concerned for their children. They're concerned parents. They're not far right, whatever that is meant to mean these days. So that's the first one, to answer your question. That's the first one, and that's in Dumfries this Saturday, the 31st, at 12 noon at the Midsteeple on the High Street. Please be there if you can. The second one, of course, is the following Saturday, which is Saturday, the 7th of September, and that's in Glasgow. That's going to be a big one. We're all looking forward to that. There's going to be several speakers at it, and it's going to be really, really good. Let's talk about that. That's the pro-UK rally, or what is being called now Enough is Enough. Stand together to protect our country. George Square, 7th of September at 1 p.m. Please be there if you can. Again, that's a non-party political rally. It is simply going to have speakers who are going to be talking about the huge numbers of people now coming into the country, both legal and illegal, and how those numbers need to end. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later in the programme. Just the relevance and the importance of that rally as well, because that will be the first time in my knowledge ever that there's been a rally in George Square to stop immigration specifically, a non-party political rally, or indeed a rally of any kind. That's the first time there's been a major one. And the people who promote mass immigration are having a conniption fit. Oh man, they are upset. They are angry. They are annoyed because they see their comfy, cozy narrative that they have been lazily telling everybody about for the last 20, 30 years. They see it slipping away. They see it slipping away. The mass immigration narrative, the poor asylum seekers crossing the English Channel narrative. They see those two narratives, the idea that we need mass immigration and the idea that the people crossing the Channel are genuine. They see those narratives slipping away, being exposed. And the last thing they want is eloquent, sensible, normal people in Glasgow to say to them, "You're talking mince." Oh, that drives them mad. And I know it does, because I read the National every day so that you don't have to. And the material in there from people complaining, they're the Leslie Riddocks of this world, complaining and calling for a mass counter demonstration. Now, there is going to be a counter demonstration to the Glasgow Cabbies Enough is Enough rally in the National yesterday. Counter protest, go ahead. This group that calls itself Stand Up to Racism, although we like to call them Stand Up for Open Borders, Mass Migration, and the complete collapse of public services. This group yesterday confirmed that its counter-protest in response to an anti-immigration rally has been given the go-ahead by Glasgow City Council. Well, that's interesting to me that it's been, quote unquote, given the go-ahead, because you can hold a rally in George Square without permission unless you're putting up a stage. So I think they must be putting up a stage in that case. So they'll have a big booming stage at the other end of the square, and the Glasgow Cabbie will be at the cenotaph end of the square. Won't have a stage, but we'll certainly have a platform for people to stand on. But it will be a genuine grassroots event, because this counter protest organised by this NGO is very well funded. It says here that the event has support from trade unions and civil society organisations. Unite, Unison, and the Scottish Trades Union Congress are among the organisations supporting the event. So in other words, these groups, which are meant to stand up for the working people of Scotland, that's Unite, Unison, and the Scottish Trades Union Congress, are among the organisations supporting an event against the normal working people of Glasgow. They're supporting an event to try to shut up the normal working people of Glasgow, who are legitimately concerned about the levels of mass immigration, who are legitimately concerned about the so-called asylum seekers, many of whom we know nothing of. We don't know where they've come from. We don't know what their life experiences have been. We don't know if they've broken the law or anything like that. They are standing up. Unison and the Scottish Trades Union Congress are standing up for these people. They're not standing up for the normal working people of Glasgow. They have betrayed us. They have betrayed us, and they will continue to betray us until there are democratic consequences for their betrayal. And Labour is behind a lot of these groups as well, and supports a lot of these groups as well. And so Labour is now in the invidious position of appearing to turn against the people of Glasgow as well. So it's going to be very interesting just to see what happens and how it goes down. And one thing we do know is that the people on our side, the people on the immigration restrictionist point of view, will be extremely well behaved and will get our points over very clearly, that we must secure our borders. We must end mass immigration. We must stop the boats. We must send the boats back. And we cannot have these so-called asylum seekers, of whom we know nothing, being resettled throughout Scotland. We cannot have that. It has to stop. It has to stop. And that's the narrative. That's the new narrative, as they like to say, that's coming out now. And their old narrative that somehow we've got to go along with it because we quote unquote need mass immigration, or that these endless streams of thousands and thousands of so-called asylum seekers are somehow genuine. All of that has to go with the wind. It has to be brushed away because it's no longer relevant to the modern world. So we would say to Unite and Unison and the Scottish Trades Union Congress, you're going to have to change your tune, because this is the new tune that you're going to have to start singing. There's no need for mass immigration, and we have to stop all the bogus asylum fraud. So that, no doubt, will be heard. Messages like that, no doubt, will be heard on the 7th of September in George Square, Glasgow at 1 p.m. So please do come along. It's a family-friendly event. Bring everybody that you can and show that Glasgow cares about these matters. Got quite a few comments coming in. So there you go. That was my answer to the lady who asked for more information about it. Paranormal Channel says, yep, we're sick of the crime here, and two-tier Starmer. Hi to British Legends. This person says, we are overrun with illegal migrants in Scotland. Send them back. Michael Bridges wonders, do you think Reform could be the alternate party? Reform at the moment is the only hope that Scotland has to get to get immigration restrictionist voices into the Scottish Parliament. Reform is the only chance that we have, because Labour is not immigration restrictionist. SNP and Greens and Lib Dems are most certainly not. They're for more of it. So the only party that could possibly get in would be Reform. And believe me, they're worried because, as I'll mention a little later in the programme, I was in the Scottish Parliament last Wednesday, and the people, one or two of the people that were there, were expressing their fears that Reform were going to get MSPs. So Reform is already scaring the establishment at Holyrood, already scaring them. And yes, I do think that Reform will get candidates. If they get 7% across all the regions, then they will get 8, at least, candidates elected on the regional list in 2026, which is only 20 months away. It's going to be with us quicker than you may think. And that's Reform's unique selling point, is stop immigration. And none of the other parties can be taken seriously on that matter. And people will say, well, Alistair, Holyrood doesn't have any power over immigration per se. Well, it can't make specific laws, but as I've said before, it is a voice. It will, when you get politicians in there, they can talk about anything they want. They can actually have debates about anything that they want. So they can talk about it and they can promote the alternative points of view. And it also does have, Holyrood also does have power over things like planning. And it can decide whether a building should be renovated in order to accommodate asylum seekers, for example. So there is powers that Holyrood has that relate to immigration, even though they don't have the ultimate power over it. So it's important to get immigration restrictionist voices in. And that's the phrase that we're using, immigration restrictionist. It's far better than anti-immigration, which is not only a negative, but isn't entirely accurate either. Whereas immigration restrictionist means we want immigration to be restricted at whatever level it is. We want it to be restricted even more. So immigration restrictionist is a good phrase to use. It's a little bit loud, a little bit complicated, I suppose, but I think it's better than anti-immigration movement or something like that. Hello to David, who says hello to everybody watching across Blighty. Blighty, yeah, that's a good name. That's what it used to be called. Rorschach says, England are sending them here. No doubt, no doubt. Oh, crikey. Agnes says she just saw a post about the Home Office trying to rent properties on Arran for illegals. Yeah. There's hundreds coming in every day, and these people have to be put up somewhere. And the betrayal, the political betrayal that we have suffered means that these politicians are just putting them up everywhere. When in fact, what they should simply do is stop the boats. And it's easy enough to stop the boats. And you don't even have to be particularly aggressive about it. You just need the Royal Navy and some of its smaller boats to go in and literally stop the boats and lash them up and just drag a few back behind, just tow a few back, and believe me, it will start to stop. And it also requires a hard attitude towards France, and even if it requires a diplomatic incident, it has to be done. But we're also troubled as well by the fact that we're not sending anyone back to Iran and Syria or Afghanistan, where in fact we should be doing that. Pakistan sends people back to Afghanistan. Denmark sends people back to Syria. The reason we're not sending people back to Syria or Iran is because we're falling into step with the American-Israeli position on the Middle East, which is that these countries are to be considered hostile, where in fact we should not be considering them hostile. We should simply just be returning people to them, just as Denmark does, for example. Eric says, Labour popularity hasn't really changed since the 2019 election, only a 1% increase. We need to persuade non-voters to vote in the next election, because in this election, 40.1% didn't vote. Yes, if they've got somebody to vote for, which certainly they should have in 2026. There's quite a few elections coming up. 2025, it's English council elections. 2026, it's Scottish Holyrood elections. 2027 is Scottish council elections. So this issue is a live issue, and it's going to be a live issue for the next 3 years at least, during all the time that Starmer is in power. So we will get a chance to use our vote. Well, I agree with T-Tube here, who says, when the hotels finally empty of the illegals, the British public should boycott all hotels that took the taxpayers' coin and encouraged the influx. Good point. Wild in the Wood says, do we have anything for Edinburgh and Fife areas? Well, no, and not that I'm aware of. But the thing is, we is simply local people who choose to do something about it, and that's the reality of it. It's just local people doing this. It's not what Two-Tier Keir says or what the media try to tell you. There's no real organization behind any of these gatherings. It's just local people who choose to do something. And so if there's local people in Fife or Edinburgh or anywhere who think that they should protest, then it's for them to organize if they can. I know that's not a good answer. I know it would be great if we had like Unison or Unite or Scottish Trades Union Congress or civil society organizations to organize these things for us with the money and the machine and the personnel paid for by the British taxpayer. It would be great if we had similar who could organize for us, the people of the country, instead of organizing on behalf of the bogus asylum seekers. That would be wonderful if we had that, but unfortunately we don't have such a thing in society, which is one of the reasons why we're losing this battle. However, do not be disheartened, because things are beginning to change. As we've seen, somebody's organizing a rally in Dumfries this Saturday at the Midsteeple at 12 o'clock. And then the following Saturday, the 7th of September, there's going to be the big immigration restrictionist rally in Glasgow at 1 o'clock. Why are we paying for tax to give it away to illegal immigrants? You're not the first person to ask that very pertinent and important question. 500 came over yesterday, says Alan. The invasion continues unabated. Yep. And it is ridiculous that anybody who wants control over migration seems to be labelled as far right. And the reason people are labelled that is because the people who want mass immigration, who want demographic change for whatever reasons, whether that's economic or because they just don't like white people, and there is a lot of that racism among some of these organizers, whatever the reasons are, then they're not interested. They're not interested in explaining them. They're just interested in shutting you up. And so they call you nasty names. They try to call you racist or try to misrepresent in some way using labels like far right, when in fact there's absolutely nothing right wing or indeed left wing about wanting your borders to be secure. There's nothing left wing or right wing about wanting your children to be safe. There's nothing left wing or right wing about thinking that people should come into the country legally. If somebody's first act on entering the country is to break the law by coming in illegally, then what does that tell you about their future contribution to society? It's probably not going to be particularly good. So it's not even a left wing or right wing thing when you get right down to it. But because these people, I'm talking about your unisons, your unites, your trade union congresses, your civil society organizations, they want to smear everybody. Because if our point of view got heard, then some of these people would actually be out of a job as well. Marie thinks the illegals will still be in the hotels for many years. Goodness me. Well, it's probably better that they're in hotel. If they're going to stay anywhere, I mean, they should get shipped back to France. But if they're going to stay anywhere, it's probably better that they're shipped and contained in some hotel rather than, moving in next door. Cliff says Starmer goes to Germany where he calls the migration crisis illegal immigration, when in the UK he calls it irregular immigration. Oh, yeah. And he then encourages police to scan social media platforms to seek out people using what he calls, quote unquote, racism. Yeah, irregular immigration. That's such a stupid phrase. That's like saying a bank robber is an irregular customer or something like that. Wild in the Woods says, let them show who are the hateful ones, as they always do. Just speak the truth and sense, and they have no leg to stand on. Absolutely. Absolutely. Johnny thinks unions getting involved is absolutely disgusting, shows who they represent. Yep, and it's not us, Johnny. And what you find with these unions as well, and we saw this when I spoke with a colleague on the 10th of August, and I was surrounded by about 150 of them. It's not like members of the trade unions, it's the trade union staff. It's the people who are on paid salaries to run these organizations. They're the ones that get out there and kick a fuss up. It's not like your normal members of trade unions who have obviously got better things to do with their time. It's the ideologically motivated staff who go to these events. And you'll see that on the 7th of September as well. It's the ideologically motivated staff who are going to be there. It's not going to be like normal people, as I like to call them. Christ is King says, the UK can't take any more. It's out of control. Our values and way of life is being destroyed. Women and children are not safe to walk the streets. And yeah, we do concentrate on illegal immigration because it is so egregious. It is so obviously wrong. Watching your country being invaded, everybody should be able to agree that that's a bad thing. Obviously, your trade union salaried staff don't agree that it's a bad thing, but most normal people would agree that that's totally wrong, whether you're left wing or right wing or in between. And so we can concentrate on illegal immigration because that's something that so obviously needs to stop. But the legal immigration as well is so high. It's so high that it is ultimately going to be bad for the country because it's overwhelming resources and it's also lowering the overall income per capita. But once you get the discussion going about illegal immigration, you can then move it to the legal immigration as well and see what can be done about that. Hey, DTube has given us a super chat. Thank you very much, sir. DTube, he says, boycott all the hotels and businesses who have taken our taxpayers' money and encouraged this illegal immigration. And the first thing, we have to be safe or we can't help others. That's correct. If you go to the Home Office website, the very first sentence in the Home Office website says, quote, "The first duty of the government is to keep citizens safe and the country secure," close quote. So that's not us saying that. That's the Home Office saying it. Do you think that they have served their duty well? Is it really performing its duty to the citizens and the country? Or has it abdicated its duty to keep the citizens safe and the borders of the country secure? It's pretty obvious it's abdicated its duty. And well, David says, how do the Greens, who want to save the environment, feel about the need to build 500,000 houses a year for the next 10 years? Given that they don't believe in borders, there won't be much countryside left after that. But for the Greens, it doesn't appear to be a contradiction. That's correct. The Greens are kind of strange on that. A lot of them are just, they're kind of anti-white, actually. I know they wouldn't want to admit it, but there's really not much more of an explanation that you can find when a contradiction like that is so heavy. Well, I mean, these are people who are actually telling us out of one side of their mouth that we should have less children because the world's overpopulated. But out the other side of their mouth, they're going to say we need to have more immigration. 1.2 million a year long-term immigrants into the UK isn't enough. We need more. Oh, and by the way, don't have any children while you're at it. They just are so confused, so confused. That's when they're not being deliberately malicious. Dorothy says, we will be there on Saturday. Well, the Saturday one is the first Saturday, which is the 31st, that's in Dumfries. And then the Saturday after that, which is the 7th, that's in Glasgow. Dorothy says, I can't stand the lies any longer. All of my voting life, I have voted SNP. I can't do it anymore. I'm glad that you can't. And that brings to mind this article, link in support for yes and the SNP decisively broken, research finds. And this is from the National on the 7th of August 24. The link between Scots' views on independence and how they vote for parliamentary parties came to a, quote, decisive end in the 2024 general election, according to new research. The new research published by the Scottish Election Study in the wake of the election has now pointed to a slight correlation in the opposite direction. Areas which voted yes in 2014, in the 2014 referendum, are now less likely to back the SNP than areas which voted no. It found that more yes voters now back unionist parties than vice versa. And it also found, quote, that the SNP lost more support in yes voting areas than no voting ones. Isn't that interesting? The research aligns with observations made by polling expert Professor John Curtis ahead of the general election. In April 23, Curtis told the National that more and more 2014 yes voters were saying they would not vote SNP, which he said was a problem for the party. That's certainly a problem for the party, isn't it? And in yesterday's paper, to back up what I'm saying here, Kevin McKenna in the Herald says, I'm now glad we didn't win in 2014. By we, he means the people who voted yes in 2014, which included him. Although he wasn't a particularly strong yes voter. I voted yes because I wanted us to be able to sign our own checks and to make our own mistakes and not to be blaming the English for any of our failures. Well, I'm sorry if you don't understand the Scottish psyche, but the Scottish psyche among some people will always be to blame the English for particular failures. That's just a fact, sir. However, the fact remained that for him, independence would never be as important as faith, family, or the fortunes of my favourite football club. Crikey. Let's break up the United Kingdom, but that's not as important as the fortunes of my favourite football club. Anyway, he goes on to say it's tempting to choose from a large suite of SNP policy failures to show why these people could never have been entrusted with the added responsibilities that full independence would have conferred. What has been unforgivable, though, is how the SNP has created a climate of fear across every sector in which its writ runs. Just as unconscionable is how this party now openly rewards mediocrity and infantilism while people of real talent are bullied. The SNP has developed a deep loathing of working class communities, and nowhere was this more evident than in its hate crime legislation. This formed part of a pattern that started with the absurd named persons legislation. It continued with its minimum unit alcohol pricing legislation. Sitting alongside this is the substantive threat that exists within the SNP towards women and girls. Luckily, the UK government's use of a Section 35 order removed some of the jeopardy embedded at the heart of the proposed GRR legislation. In the 10 years since the independence referendum, the SNP has become a menace to the people of Scotland, especially women and poor people. Not until all those who helped create this climate of fear and loathing are removed can any of us even think about an independent Scotland. The SNP has ruined it for an entire generation and made Scotland a darker place. Oh my goodness me. I'm now glad we didn't win in 2014. That was Kevin McKenna in the Herald, 27th of August. 2024. He was sticking it to them there. Crikey. Support Tommy says 5,000 empty beds set aside here in England. British vets homeless. Indeed. Alan says, didn't they say when we left Afghanistan that the Taliban had changed? They probably did, but never are the governments that get us into wars to be believed on anything. Gosh, we are researching the First World War at the moment for our next Union Heart. And an incredibly huge issue, I should say, but we're trying to hone in on a few matters related specifically to Scotland and to Northern Ireland and to Glasgow in particular for a 16-pager, which will be free to our union supporters. That's the people who donate monthly. Hopefully everything going according to plan, God willing, that'll be out September, October. Anyway, today is the 110th anniversary of the first naval conflict that Britain was involved in during World War I, which was the Battle of Heligoland, which is there just above Germany and to the left of Denmark. It's a tiny little island called Heligoland. And there was a naval battle between the British and the Germans on this day, 28th of August, back in 1914, 110 years ago. And this England's Illustrated History of the First World War, a really, really good magazine. This came out 10 years ago. We bought a copy for the office. There were two major battles at Heligoland. Firstly, the cat and mouse tactics between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet, because whoever could control the North Sea had a major advantage. and the British struck first at the Battle of Heligoland on the 28th of August 1914, 110 years ago today. After which Vice Admiral Sir David Beatty took public credit for the victory, but it was Commodore Reginald Tyrwhitt's 37 destroyers and submarines which fought at close range. 4 German ships were lost with only minimal damage to the British. And Wikipedia tells us that there was a lot of Germans killed in these 4 ships, of which that's one of them going down there. That's the sinking of the German cruiser Mainz on this day. That's it in the background. A photograph taken from the deck of a British cruiser just before the Mainz sank. British sailors in the foreground watching it on fire, standing next to their 6-inch gun. And that ship in the background was to keel over and sink, no doubt, with the loss of a lot of German men. 712 German sailors killed and 336 taken prisoner. So that was on this day in the Battle of Heligoland. Michael says, well, what's the legal position? My understanding is they're supposed to stay in the first safe country. Well, basically, yes, although the immigration lawyers will claim that that's not a fixed requirement. But what you simply can't expect to do is to be sitting safely in a country such as France and then decide to impose yourself on another country and expect us to take care of you when, in fact, you are perfectly safe in France. But yeah, ideally, that should be the first safe country, shouldn't it? And then there should always be an acknowledgement that you're going to go back when things get right again. It's not like it shouldn't just be a way to immigrate forever. It should be like, I'll move out to safety, and then when things have recovered, I'll move back again. That should always be the accepted position. There's so much that can be done about that, but it's a massive industry now, massive industry. So many people making lots of money, lots of bank, as they say, on the back of the asylum industry. Lawyers, civil society, NGOs, all these trade unions, they're all getting government funding as well for this. I mean, what's legal aid, for example, if it's not government funding? And we certainly do see that. We definitely do see Africans being rehoused in every house that comes up. I've noticed that, even in the areas that I'm around. Hey, Derek has given a super chat. Thanks very much. He says, God help the United Kingdom if we don't get migration under control, regardless of who is in charge. Absolutely, Derek. That's right. Folks that want to give a super chat, if you're on YouTube, you see a little $sign. That's the super chat button. Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Lots of good comments coming in tonight. Alapa says there's too much left-wingery nonsense in Scotland. Where is the voice of the right wing in Scotland? If it still exists, then they're leaving the country to be spoken for the left. Yes, that's right. Well, if you're talking about the mainstream parties, who would be the voice of the right in Holyrood? I suppose you would say it would be the Tory party. Are they really that effective when it comes to these matters, such as immigration? I don't think that they are particularly effective. They are not talking out loud. So the voice of immigration restrictionism, anyway, is left to the small groups, the fringes. And before I forget, I just want to bring up a matter. last Wednesday, I myself, in my personal capacity, went to a seminar that was being held in Holyrood in the Parliament, because every August they have what they call the Festival of Politics. And the Festival of Politics is every day they'll have several seminars, and there'll be a panel up the front of so-called experts, and there'll be a chairman who's likely to be an MSP, and the experts talk for 10 minutes each, and then it gets opened up for questions. And I noticed there was a very interesting one that was on, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to get a ticket to that. It was called Making Amends for Empire. Has Scotland done enough? So straight away, that title kind of really rubbed me up the wrong way, because I'm like, well, that's talk about a loaded question. You've already given us the answer. Obviously, Scotland's not done enough. And that seemed to be the prevailing theme from the panel, that more was needed and that we all hadn't done enough, whatever enough was meant to be. Anyway, it was an interesting enough event, and I went along to hear what the so-called experts had to say, and they were all of a type, as you can imagine, right? There wasn't any Alistair McConnachie types on the panel. But I did get the mic at the end of the day, and I did point out that basically the event was conflating the matter of slavery with the British Empire, when these are actually two different things. They're certainly connected, and you can't disconnect them. But we can all agree that slavery is wrong from today's modern perspective. But from today's modern perspective, we can't necessarily agree that the British Empire was wrong. And those were the exact words that I said. And I said that it's not appropriate to conflate slavery with the British Empire, with colonialism, with imperialism, because while it was colonialism that arguably enslaved people, it was also colonialism that freed them. So you can't conflate the two things. There's obviously good elements of colonialism. There's obviously good elements of the British Empire. There's obviously good elements of imperialism. I don't know if that point, I think the point was understood. I don't think it was agreed with as far as I could see from the panel, but at least that point was made. And what I also found interesting was that one of the panelists there was from an organization called Glasgow organization, another one of these civil society orgs called the Campaign for Racial Equality and Rights. And as far as I could see, they had what's called partnered with the Scottish Parliament to put this on. I don't know what that would involve, partnering with the Scottish Parliament to put it on. But I said to the Parliament in my feedback that our organisation, A Force for Good, would be very happy to partner with Holyrood at a future Festival of Politics to put on a seminar that could look at issues like this, but from perhaps a different perspective, from a pro-empire perspective, or at least not from a perspective which is knocking the concept of the empire. So I'm going to persist with that, because I'd really like to put that on. And I know people who would rise up and be panelists for that as well. So that could be a really interesting project, whether it's for next year or the year after, or maybe we're going to have to wait until reform candidates get into the Parliament, in order that we've got voices in the Parliament who may be favourably inclined to host such a meeting or to chair such a meeting. I don't know, but I'm going to persist with this idea that A Force for Good could partner with Holyrood in order to put on a seminar at the Festival of Politics in future. So watch this space, folks. Also, folks, remember our One Big Country, a big book for the Union, Volume 1. Volume 2 is going to be out in time for Christmas. And this is a really good introduction to what Unionists believe, generally speaking. Very easily read, very straightforward, very comprehensive. And you get that by simply going to amazon.co.uk and searching Amazon for One Big Country. Great book, that. Great book. I wish, well, I don't wish, because I wish we had known all of that stuff in 2014. We'd have won even more. But of course, 2014, 10 years ago, caught us all off guard. And it's taken time for the unionist position to be built up, which is what we do here at A Force for Good. So if you like what we do, folks, please do consider becoming a supporter. Please do consider joining our union supporters program at aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters. You get free magazines. Every time a magazine comes out, you get a free one. You get to request all the back issues free. And you get free badges, and you get free wee books for the union as well. And you get lots of rewards depending upon how much you donate each month. And we really do appreciate it, folks. We really do, because that's how we survive. Okay, folks, it's the top of the hour. Derek says congrats, as does Debbie, as does Catherine. And Alan says, woohoo, fantastic, thanks. Hey there. Good. Okay, folks. It's been a good show. It's gone quite fast. I wasn't able to get everything that we want. We're going to be back next week. We've got a guest next week. In the meantime, if you're in Dumfries this Saturday, please pay a trip to the Midsteeple at 12 o'clock to stand with the people who are against mass immigration and who are calling for an end to illegal immigration. That's in Dumfries at 12 o'clock this Saturday, the 31st of August. And also put a date in your diary for the 7th of September. George Square, 1 o'clock. Glasgow Cabbies event. Enough is enough. We'll see you next week, folks. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.